Dear Professor Jin-Won An, dear members of the faculty, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me enormous pleasure to be once again with you at the Handong Global University to participate this time in the opening of the International Women's Forum, supported by the Ministry of Education of the Republic of Korea. I say it is important because the issues of gender equality is not just a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable development. Eradicating gender issues means a world where women and men, girls and boys, all enjoy equal rights. And as we know very well, when women and girls prosper, communities and societies prosper. Over the years, the world has gotten closer to achieving gender equality. There is today better representation of women in politics, more economic opportunities, better healthcare in many places of the world. However, the World Economic Forum estimates that it will take another century before true gender equality becomes a reality. Since the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations has played a major role in recognizing equal rights of women and men to participate in public affairs, decision-making bodies, positions, processes, as well as in all other spheres of life. This fundamental right is reaffirmed in the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or the so-called CEDAW Convention, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Political Rights of Women, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action, adopted at the major conference at 1995, organized by the United Nations, and many other major documents. The establishment of inclusive and representative governance is also an essential condition for the achievement of sustainable development goals by 2030, particularly goal number 5. So, where do we stand collectively today? I would like to speak about two major issues. The first one is about women representation in politics, in public life, the leadership of women, and also women in the economic life of societies. And when we speak about where we're standing today, we should definitely have in mind the COVID-19 pandemic. We all know from experience at the United Nations that the impacts of crisis are never gender neutral. And the COVID-19 crisis is no exception. An effective response to the pandemic and its social and economic consequences requires inclusive participation and leadership for strong and sustained action that is beneficial for everyone, including for women. The goal of achieving gender parity in decision-making and leadership from that point of view is more critical than ever. In 2021, women accounted for only a quarter of parliamentary membership worldwide, and 36% of elected officials in local deliberative bodies. I mention this because while acknowledging the advancement made towards ensuring the participation and the growing number, constantly growing number of women in political decision-making processes, progress is still very slow, and the average representation of women in political offices remain far too lower than men. Globally, only 21.3% of ministers are women, and in only 30 cabinets worldwide did women make up at least for 40% of ministers. women's underrepresentation as health ministers was essentially concerning in the midst of the pandemic. And it was important to mention this, because while women made up to 70% of health sector workers, only 24.7% of the world's health ministers were women. These are data that are taken from the classification and from a register, which is in the monitoring of the International Interparliamentarian Union. So, as I said, gender equality is central to the achievement of all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and its implementation needs integrated and rights-based approach. The achieving of the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 by the United Nations indeed is important when gender parity is not as yet there. Because we know that gender parity today strongly influences economies and society's advances. So successfully harnessing and mobilizing half of the world's total pool of talents, I would say, has a huge impact on growth, competitiveness, and innovation in economies and organizations all across the globe. I would say that today, gender inequality prevails in nearly every society in the world. It is rooted in unequal access to education, in social customs, and I would say in expectations about roles that are divided along gender lines. Only today, 30% of professionals in the sciences worldwide are women. So increasing women's participation in innovation, in science, in technology is critical for meeting the global challenges today. The numbers back up this assessment. According to a report by the McKinsey Global Institute, gender equality in the labor force could add up to $28 trillion to the global economy by 2025. And this assessment was made last year. A girl's eventual income will increase by up to 20% for every year she stays in school, according to the United Nations Women. It also encourages girls to marry later and have fewer children, and leaves them less vulnerable to violence. And in continuing my review about women in economy and their contribution also to the well-being, economic growth, innovation, and women taking up leadership positions, I would like to mention a recent Harvard Business Review study, which assessed that companies that are diverse tend to be more innovative, and innovative companies tend to be more diverse, and that both factors tend to be drivers of companies' growth. Recent studies show also that increased participation of women on company boards leads to better financial results, as well as high levels of corporate philanthropy. And nonetheless, women hold less than 5% of chief executive officer positions in the Standard & Poor's 500 companies, and less than 20% on company boards. This is not justified at all. There are many studies will show that women make great leaders, particularly when we speak about political representation, and women also in economy. One of the reasons, the identified reasons of why women they make great leaders are the following: that they value work-life balance, they are empathetic, they make great listeners, they focus on teamwork, they are good at multitasking, They're motivated by challenges. They're strong communicators. They can wear many hats. They handle crisis situations well. And here, I would like to say something equally important. It is not that people of either gender make better leaders. The reality is that differences between male and female leadership styles can broaden a company's pool of creativity and innovation. This, on its side, enhances the success of any organization when both men and women are promoted to high-level positions. And if I go back to the current situation and the consequences of the global COVID-19 pandemic, we need now to shift the paradigm in order to build back better. We need indeed a paradigm shift which is based on inclusive and representative governance by 2030. And to achieve this objective, progress towards equality can no longer be simply incremental. It requires prompt and firm action. And while specific action may need to take into account the individual context, of course, of states around the world, progress essentially requires a widespread move towards concrete and impactful solutions. Just recently, beginning of this year, the International Parliamentarian Union and the Committee on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women formulated and launched the call for an acceleration towards the equal representation and leadership of men and women in political office. This representation, this acceleration, they mentioned, emphasized, should be built on establishing gender parity targets and adopting and implementing national action plans to reach the parity target. Among the mentioned actions to be taken, they emphasize the following: remove the barriers to equality, substantive, structural, cultural, between men and women, to open the world politics to women from diverse backgrounds and groups in society, to transform the political arena into an enabling space or environment where women feel comfortable to work and to contribute, to offer a positive example to society at large, to address and reflect the equality demands of a modern society, to make political institutions and processes more efficient, legitimate, and effective. And as far as the legal and policy frameworks to achieve gender parity, one of the recommendations includes the following: to adopt electoral gender quotas to reach the gender parity target, to reform or repeal laws that discriminate against women, and to adopt comprehensive legislation that guarantees gender equality in all areas of life, and to adopt laws to prevent and criminalize gender-based violence against women in politics, including harassment, sexual harassment, and ensuring reparation for survivors. So to sum it up, what is important nowadays is to make institutions gender sensitive and gender responsive. I would like to say at the end of my presentation, I think we should stop seeing the gender equality between women and men as a zero-sum game. Diversity isn't a zero-sum game that requires men to lose for women to gain. True diversity improves indeed creativity, productivity, profitability for everyone in life. Because once again, let me emphasize, when women prosper, families, communities, and societies prosper. I wish you a very successful International Women's Forum, and thank you for your attention.